rages against all wise judgment. And I want to bring up for you, and let me just grab my hard copy, if I can read it, by the way. Deborah and I were out the other day, and I've been thinking about picking up a new Bible with larger print. And when I picked one up, it had gigantic print, but blurry, still blurry. It didn't change anything. And so she says, you have a pair of glasses, and someday I'll willingly concede that I need them. But for today, I'll just do this. But anyway, a man who isolates, this is New King James, a man who isolates himself seeks his own desire. He rages against all wise judgment. And that's what you see on the screen as well. Somebody read that to me from King James if you have it in your hands. Brian, you might have it.
Yeah. Through desire a man, having separated himself, seeketh and intermeddleth with all wisdom.
Yeah. So a man who separates himself, right? A man who distances himself, a man who disconnects from other people, generally will just then rely upon his own understanding and wisdom to make his choices and decisions. He's not looking for any judgment or help or aid or counsel or instruction from anyone else. And so what I want us to appreciate from that simple thought is that the proverb warns us of the danger of that. He rages against the wisdom and guidance that could come from other sources. And he generally will distance or isolate himself because he simply just doesn't want to what? He doesn't want to hear it. He doesn't want that help or guidance along the path. So let me use the questions as we've been doing it. Again, every time I start generic, I end up going down paths that the questions will lead us anyway. And so let's do that. Grab your sheets if you have them, we'll use those questions to guide us through this discussion this morning. So write the disclaimer. Sometimes when you deal with the Proverbs, you look at some of those kinds of things. And so I ask this question, are there moments when it is good to be alone? And that seems like a silly question, but it's important in this conversation. Sure, it's absolutely important sometimes to be alone. What example out of Matthew 6 does that share with us? Prayer, right? If you look at Matthew 6 itself, I'll show it to you on the screen. But thou, when thou prayest, enter into thy closet, and when thou hast shut thy door, pray to thy Father which is in secret, and thy Father which seeth in secret shall reward thee openly. Who was the prime example of exactly that in some senses? Jesus, right? Jesus is the perfect example of that. How many times in the midst of some of the busiest work and the most important, if you would, things as it relates, that's exactly right. Jesus would leave those multitudes, go find a mountain somewhere. He would even at times take his own disciples and tell them what? Go. Yeah, go away. Get on that boat. You guys go on across. I'll meet up with you later. He purposely found moments to be alone. So all the principle I want us to appreciate from that is simply this. Proverb 18:1 isn't saying that you should never disconnect, or you should never separate yourself, or you should never find time by yourself. There are important moments in life that we need to be alone and appreciate that. Go ahead, Ron.
I think that's a good example for that. I mean, because even when Paul, when he got the revelations from the ascended Lord, he was alone. I think that's a good order, is to approach the Lord first, have that relationship, and then that makes the other relationships around you maybe stronger.
Sure. Yeah, that personal, very direct relationship with the Father then can strengthen me when I am in connection to other people, and it can aid me in that. And all of us can appreciate that, right? I walk a lot still, and I spend a lot of time. I walk that trail down there at the park all the time, and there's just something therapeutic to me about just being out there by myself. Nothing but my thoughts and the music that's playing in my ears as I'm walking around that track. And it's amazing, right? Just that little bit of solitude can be beneficial. But if my intent is not to just spend some time alone in thought, or more importantly in prayer, but to just disconnect from anything and everyone permanently, then that's really what we're challenged with here this morning in this text. The idea of having a desire to never connect and to never be associated with others for a variety of reasons. That's really the topic for our discussion this morning. So second question then, in Proverb 18:1, this text, why is this person in this text seeking isolation? Okay, maybe to find his own desires and his own thoughts and his own purposes, but that raging against the wisdom, right? He's all about himself. Any other thoughts you might have put down there? That why in this text is he seeking isolation?
Against any judgment or instruction.
Okay, so if I don't want to hear anybody's advice, counsel, judgment, instruction, aid, whatever, right? Then either I've got to embrace it or just disconnect from it. And so in this text, he's just saying so that he doesn't have to hear or deal with it, he just disconnects and stays isolated from any opportunity for that to happen.
Wants to separate as an unfriendly person to begin with.
Yeah. And there are other proverbs, and we'll deal with before we're done in our series. But you're right. There's an issue, right, that's developing in that mindset that doesn't want any of that connectivity, and would make it hard for people to connect anyway. That can be worked on and improved upon. So, what then does Ecclesiastes 4 verses 9 through 12 teach us as it relates to this issue? And we've already talked a couple times, I think, about this text. I'll show it to you on the screen, and then we'll use it and look at it as it relates to this topic matter. But remember, this is that passage that the Ecclesiastes writer wrote about two are better than what? Two are better than one, because they have a good reward for their labor. For if they fall, the one will lift up his fellow. But woe to him that is alone when he falleth. And remember, we talked about that in our study before. For he hath not another to help him up. Again, if two lie together, and then they have heat, but how can one be warm alone? And if one prevail against him, two shall withstand him, and a threefold cord is not quickly broken. The challenge here is a man who isolates himself, not only can he not receive this benefit, but what else cannot happen? Yeah, he can't help others or himself if he's disconnected, right? If he can't offer any assistance, he can't be of any help or aid, and not only does that create that problem, but it also disconnects him in a way that he can't receive aid or benefit that is necessary as well. I think sometimes we forget that God designed us to need each other. We are designed and created in such a way, and I think we can see that before we're done here, the importance of recognizing how God's purpose and design is for us to have connectivity and relationships so that we can be of help and assistance to others. And I think the more we appreciate that, the less isolated we'll want to be. And to appreciate the very nature that God has instilled in us. What kinds of reason? We'll talk a little bit about this idea in this text in very specific ways about how he says because he rages against judgment. But let's talk a little bit. So what other reasons could you come up with that people might want to isolate themselves? No?
They may feel shameful for something they've done.
Okay. So maybe there's something they have done or said or acted in their life, and because of the shame maybe that's connected to that, it may not be something that they want to be disconnected, but they just feel embarrassed to try to be connected. What's the answer to that, by the way? Yeah, right. Right. If there's sin that needs to be repented of, do that. But on the other side of that, what's necessary? What's on the other side of repentance? Forgiveness. Forgiveness. Right? The answer to help somebody who's struggling because they're isolating themselves because they and it's true, right? Because they feel some continual shame because of some decision or choice that they've made in their life. To help aid them get past that sense of isolation, forgiveness is going to be necessary in order to do that. So that might be a reason. What other things you might think of would cause somebody maybe to want to isolate? And again, I'm not trying to trick you. I'm just trying to make it practical. Okay, to protect themselves from all kinds of things, right? Potentially some very specific harm, or maybe just they've been hurt too many times. And because they've been hurt too many times by other people, their response to that is, I just don't want to deal with people anymore, right? And so what can we do to help that situation?
I don't know, but you can get inside your own head pretty quick. And
Yeah.
dream up all kinds of things that you need to protect yourself from that isn't necessary.
Right. And I think you're right, Kim. I think a lot of people do that, right? They maybe take a handful of real situations, and now everything's a situation. And they get into that trap in their mind, and so they begin to isolate. I think what we need to do then to help somebody break through that is to do things that might help them build trust in somebody, in me or some, right? Because that's what's lacking there maybe, and why they've gone into that isolated protective mode is that there's been some kind of trust breakdown somewhere, and so what they need to experience maybe is some connectivity that builds that bond of trust that helps them realize that not everybody's the same, and not everybody do they need to protect themselves from. That's a good example. Yeah, and I think you're right. We all kind of need to make these connectivities and then find ways to help one another through real challenges. Do you have something else?
Be very patient with them. It's just like if you're inviting someone to church for the very first time in their life, don't force them into anything. Don't try to lead them into anything. Let them see for themselves. Let them feel welcome in any situation.
Sure. Yeah. And I think patience is part of that process, right? And because the truth is, we sometimes maybe make rash judgments about why somebody has isolated themselves. We may make judgments about them, and we think we know what the problem is. I know why they're acting that way. When the truth is, we may not have a clue, right? We may not know at all about the realities of that situation, and if we're not patient, what we might just simply do, instead of trying to bring them out, and those old adages, right, of just, why are you bothered with that, and that shouldn't trouble you, and and all that kind of condescending stuff that we sometimes throw at folks, that's not very patient, and it's not very helpful.
You don't know what you're facing.
That's right, and we don't always know every reason why. Anything else you think of as it relates to, I just because when I thought about it, I thought there's all kinds of reasons why people isolate, and if we understand those better, then maybe we can help better in maybe breaking some of those challenges.
An introvert, maybe who has been hurt mentally or somebody, will isolate themselves to protect themselves.
Yeah, and that hurt that has come to so many sometimes has created a lot of folks to want to distance. And I think that maybe then what we can appreciate as well then is, well, let's use the example of Jesus for a minute. Did people hurt Jesus? Absolutely. Both physically, emotionally, things they would say about him, challenges. Did he take time away? We've already exampled that, right? Yeah, and what did he do in those times? He reconnected to his Father. He got into prayers, and he spent time reconnecting and re-strengthening himself in that relationship to be able to then return back to those situations that may bring more harm or more challenge or more difficulty. The biggest advice maybe or counsel I could offer to somebody who just feels like they've had to disconnect and have distanced themselves because of all those things is to maybe spend some time reconnecting to the Father in stronger ways that might allow them then to come back and be part of this, to be able to then be helpful and encouraging to others.
We're angry with someone, maybe I need to get away and get, Lord, I need patience right now.
Yeah. Well, I think you're right. I think sometimes, like in an angry moment, is a time. Isolate. Regain yourself. Regain some composure and patience, and before you come back into that situation.
Sometimes when people are dying and they're on their deathbed, sometimes they want to be alone. And it's just, if you watch animals, they do the exact same thing. Like a dog will try to go out in the woods. And if you come from a loving family, and you communicate well, that's not always the case. But there's people who just, when they get to that end, or if they're sick even, that they get to that point where it's just, they want to be alone, they want to die alone. And in that relationship, if you are godly, that comes back into play. Where they just want to be with their.
Right.
That's hard.
And I think, and again, and all that, and I appreciate all that, because what I'm trying to help us appreciate this morning in this discussion is, if we'll try to understand why somebody is isolating for a moment, separating themselves for a moment, then maybe we'll understand, is this somebody that just has so much self in them that they don't care about other people? They're not. Is it a Proverb 18:1 moment? Or is it really some legitimate issue that we could aid or help with to be able to turn that? And we've got to use some wisdom in trying to understand why somebody might have done that.
Clear back to the beginning, God said it's not good for man to be alone.
Yeah.
Of course, that was primarily about the husband-wife relationship. But the principle applies in a lot of different ways.
Sure.
Help.
And that's, you're exactly right. No, we'll run that path, but it's next week's material. So that's why I'm being quiet about it, because you'll leave me with nothing to say next week. But well, you know me well enough to know that ain't true. But anyway, anything else? I appreciate all those thoughts. Great conversation there. So when difficult days were approaching in Hebrews chapter 10. What did the Hebrews writer encourage Christians to do? Provoke unto love and to good works. And how are they going to accomplish that in verse 25? Yeah, to assemble together, right? Spend time together. Just look at those couple of verses as I share them on the screen. And let us consider one another to provoke unto love and good works, not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together as the manner of some is, but exhorting one another, and so much the more as you see the day approaching. I can sing by myself. I walk around my house, and who knows what I'll sing, and it's kind of great sometimes because there ain't nobody there, right? And so you just let it, sing whatever your heart's telling you to sing in that moment. But it's not anything compared to when people come together and blend their voices, right? It's not the same. It can be encouraging and uplifting within itself. It can be therapeutic, whatever you want to call it, but it's not the same as when people come together and blend their voices together and share in that provoking unto love and to good works and to encourage and uplift. You can't do that alone. The isolationist misses that. The person who's just disconnected from everything and doesn't have any interest in those relationship kinds of situations, they miss out on the benefit that the collective effort brings, and they also miss out on the responsibility the Hebrew writer gives to be active and to share that. I provoke you, you provoke me unto love and good works. We've got to reciprocate that for it to work the right way. I think a few weeks ago I talked to you a little bit about how sometimes we look at Hebrews 10 and we forget there's a context. And we talked about the fact that if he's writing to a Jewish audience prior to 70 AD, then he's talking to a Jewish audience who's probably where? In Jerusalem. And what's coming? The destruction of Jerusalem. And so when you see that day approaching, when you see those challenges and those difficulties approaching, that's not a time to isolate. That's a time to congregate. Isn't that interesting? He's trying to challenge those Christians that when you see difficult times, let's make the practical application. When you see difficult times, that's not a time to isolate. That's a time to congregate. I'll never, there's so much. I mean, if I went around this room right now and asked you about September 11th, 2001, I guarantee you I could get all kinds of details. Your memories, I promise you, have all kinds of details. When did you find out? Where were you when you found out? How did you see it? What information did you learn? How quickly did you learn it? What you were doing? What did you do the rest of that day? Was up at I'm going to sound real sophisticated here, but we were at the Symphony Friday, and we were up in Wheeling at the Symphony, and Elise Goldsberry, if you're familiar with all the Hamilton things from musicals. Anyway, she was performing with the symphony, and she told this story. She was some folks that were going to interview her to perform with the musical on Broadway, The Lion King. We're going to fly out to L.A. and do these auditions in L.A. For the national productions and the Broadway production. Anyway, I'm trying to shorten the story, but she said it was on 9/11, 2001, they were flying out there. These auditioners, these producers, got diverted to Georgia. Her first break came in The Lion King later, a couple of days later, when they finally got to L.A. But it was just fascinating, right? Here's this situation. You're waiting for your big break, and the folks that are coming to audition you get diverted on 9/11 to Georgia. And we all have stories like that, right? I remember what Deborah and I did. Mo was in a meeting at Muddy Creek that week. And we're sitting around a house going, what do we do? Right? What do you do? You just felt awful. And we finally realized, no, what we need are our brethren. We need to find some place to be with our brethren. We need to get away from this television, and we need to get away from all of that sadness and get with our brethren and experience the love of God among our brethren. And so we knew that meeting was going on. We drove down, and I can remember going down there, and for the length of that service, you realize that as dark as the world felt, and as changed as it felt, and as just everything that wanted to just make you go crawl in a hole, right? And isolate, it was important to go be with people, in particular God's people. And I'll never forget all those details, and I think that's probably the most vivid detail as it relates to that. When times of trouble come, and that temptation to isolate, particularly to isolate from our brethren, be cautious in that moment. Your brethren may be exactly who you need in that moment. More time in worship towards God may be what you need in that moment. When I may be embarrassed because there's something in my life that I need to deal with, maybe when I feel like I've been burned by trust issues by other people, when I feel all of that pressure that just feels like the right thing for me to do is just get away from everybody. Though there are moments where that might be true, maybe what I need to say to myself is, no, what I need is to get with my brothers and sisters in Christ in some capacity. That's what I need. And when those challenges were going to come to Jerusalem, and when our challenges come to us, as you see that challenge coming, spend more time. Assemble yourselves together. Don't forsake those opportunities, because that may be the very thing you need to keep you from a permanent isolation that might create more difficulties and challenges later. Important thoughts.
times that I've had problems in my head, thinking, how am I gonna solve this, what am I gonna do? Come to services, and after services, oh yeah. If for some reason the pressure's gone, but I can think clearly enough that I can solve that problem, I know how to do it.
I agree with you. I think sometimes we don't know how beneficial it is to just give us some clarity sometimes on the things that might be overwhelming our thinking. When you come into services and worship God, the wisdom of God can bring the clarity that we've been lacking maybe. Good. Go ahead.
Talking about prayer earlier, we sing a song, pray in the morning, pray in the evening, pray in the noontime, pray all the time.
Yeah, and important for us to find those moments, absolutely. Go ahead, Brian.
Throughout the scriptures, God talks about He doesn't like a false balance. And that can apply to many things. But if you have a false balance of isolation, then you need to balance the time to yourself, but then you need to balance time with those around you who are fellow believers. And if you spend too much time around everyone else, sometimes it becomes overwhelming to some people.
Sure.
And you need to separate.
Yep.
So you need to find that balancing point, and then those moments where you actually need to be alone, or the moments you need to be with some of the believers.
Sure.
And I
And
think
striking that balance isn't always easy. Yeah, not always easy. Any other thoughts? I appreciate all those. So, though the body is one in 1 Corinthians chapter 12, what does it teach us about the body of Christ? Though the body is one, what does 1 Corinthians 12 teach us about the body of Christ? Okay, parts and functions. What else? Okay, what other word is used there? Members, right? Though we are one body, we are many members, and those members don't all have what? Same function or purpose, right? What I always try to encourage people to realize is whatever you can bring to the table of service towards the Lord is important. It doesn't have to fit some grand list of things that others have deemed are the real important things. Whatever you bring to the table of service to the Lord is important. And the illustration he uses, right, is the idea that if everybody was the eye, then where would you what? How could you hear anything? Or if everybody was an ear, how would you see anything, right? That's not how the body works. And sometimes I think that the body of Christ, and I suppose you could talk about that in two ways, right? You could talk about the body of Christ as a whole, meaning all believers, or you can talk about the local sense. You could talk about a small sampling of folks who gather together on a regular basis of believers. But local assemblies, in particular, for thought for a moment, need that, right? They need all of those pieces to come to the forefront, and to appreciate that all of it has value, and all of it has meaning. How many times have you heard in your life, the Lord's church needs more preachers? You've probably heard some variation of that a lot, right? How many times have you heard, the Lord's church needs more song leaders? It's not as catchy, is it? But is it just as true? It's absolutely just as true. The Lord's church needs more folks, right? The Lord's church needs all of the various works and purposes and things that it needs to fulfill its mission and the things that it can accomplish. And sometimes we can become so enamored by one or two particular works or roles within the body that we almost make other people feel like that there's no real value in what they're doing, and they get to beginning to believe that to the point that they don't want. They won't even do that anymore, right? They won't even do that anymore because they've been made to feel like they've devalued, and now all of a sudden I'm isolating. And we've got to be cautious. I don't think that was our intent, right? When somebody says, boy, the Lord's church could really use some more preachers, we weren't trying to devalue anybody. We weren't trying to make somebody feel like that they weren't important, but we just need to be careful because sometimes what our intent and purpose of saying something may get misunderstood in different ways and maybe even cause. The Lord's body needs all the parts, all the members, all the functions, all the things that help it be what it can be, and it'll grow and mature and improve when that's recognized.
Lots of people think that what they could bring to a service would be considered insignificant by other people, when in actuality, the Bible talks about how we've all been individually crafted and have our own unique sets of abilities, and sometimes they just don't realize how much what they think is little could be a lot to someone else, and it all just comes together to form something even greater.
Sure. When all those pieces come together and every aspect joins itself, then greater things will come. And I appreciate that the encouragement that can come when you see all those parts functioning and working together.
Sort of a widow's row here, and several ladies that sat there, and they weren't vivacious people. They were there, we looked to them for their wisdom and their faith, and it's just not the same without them there, even though they didn't do great things.
It is amazing. If you couldn't hear what Pam was mentioning, let me just reiterate a little bit what she was saying, because I think it's important, because she was mentioning how over the years you'd have maybe a pocket in a particular pew in a building, and maybe there sat 3 or 4 older ladies, widows, so that there was nothing extraordinary. There was no real outward, over-the-top kinds of things they were doing that would just obviously draw your attention. But their stability, their wisdom, their example of faith, all those, that's what they brought to the table. And sometimes you don't even recognize the encouragement, and it's a shame in some ways that we don't appreciate the encouragement that's coming from that until it's gone. But it also teaches us when that hole comes and we realize, wow, they were providing more than anyone would ever recognize or even appreciate it, until all of a sudden you're missing it. And you go, yeah, there was a lot more being done there just by that solid example. I've talked to folks over the years, and I wouldn't want to name folks both live or on a camera or anything, but because I'd embarrass a lot of folks. But I know of individuals over the years when churches were struggling, trying to make decisions about what the Bible authorized and what it didn't authorize, and doing those things. I could list you all kinds of men who didn't serve as elders or deacons, weren't preachers. They weren't people in the forefront. They weren't the ones that were necessarily standing in pulpits talking about the various issues or preaching about those things. But I could show you a lot of guys who very quietly and very patiently and with great wisdom and great strength of faith held churches together from not an office or position among those brethren, but just by their fortitude and strength of faith, and the desire to be that part and to serve that part within that congregation, despite the challenges and difficulties. It might have been easier just to isolate and let those other fellows take care of those things. Important for us to think about. Let me share this other text with you. What command in Romans 12:15 would be hard to fulfill if we are continually isolated from each other? Yeah, so Romans 12:15 said, rejoice with them that do rejoice and weep with them that weep. I can't do that if I've completely disconnected from other folks. I can't fulfill what Paul's trying to encourage me to fulfill if I have just completely distanced and disconnected myself from other people. Look at that last half of that question. What command then does Galatians 6:1-5 share that also requires togetherness? And begin there in verse 1. Let me just share a couple of verses from it. Brethren, if a man be overtaken in a fault, ye which are spiritual, restore such a one in the spirit of meekness, considering thyself, lest thou also be tempted. Bear ye one another's burdens, and so fulfill the law of Christ. We can't do that if we've isolated ourselves, if we've distanced ourselves and make no real effort to appreciate the connectivity that we should have with others. How can I encourage them? How can I bear with and carry their burden with them? We sometimes forget that isolation may feel good to me for a period of time, but other people may need me and what I could help and aid them with. And it would be a mistake for us to stay in that form. Here's what Jeff wrote in the materials. He said, the isolationist enjoys being insulated from certain conflicts. But if cowardice and a lack of steadfast commitment are the reasons, he truly is raging against sound judgment. The isolationist might very well enjoy his privacy, but God did not establish His Son's church for nothing. Those of like precious faith should be knit together in a mutually edifying way, so that if one stumbles, another is there to help bear the burden. And a couple of texts that we've looked at. Perhaps you would reply that you do not need such help, but at least you do need to provide it for others. And so you could sit back and say, well, I don't need anybody's help, so who am I hurting if I isolate myself because I don't need anything? Well, okay, at minimum then, and the truth is that's not really true. You're hurting yourself more than you realize. But at minimum, you're not providing what God has challenged us to provide for one another when we do that. And even if I'm committed or convinced that be true. Many isolationists do so convinced that they need no one, yet the truth may be that they don't want to be what? They don't want to be needed. Exactly. They don't want to be needed. Jeff again wrote, such an isolationist seeks his own desire. He is cutting off others for his own selfish purposes, not because he does not need others, but because he does not like being needed by them. That's an unwise judgment. And I suppose all of us sometimes find ourselves in situations similar to that. I had a fellow tell me one time, he said he always wanted a pickup truck, but he never would buy one. You know why? Because as soon as you have a pickup truck, everybody knows you got a pickup truck. And all of a sudden, you become the guy that needs to run to the dump. You've got to be the guy that hauls the furniture, right? Yeah, and you get it with a trailer package, you're even in worse trouble.
Don't become a notary.
Yeah, right. Bernadine can attest to that. But yeah, right. That's what it is. And sometimes folks don't want to be needed. And so they don't even place themselves in a circumstance where somebody might actually call upon them for something. And that's a mistake. That's that isolationist view that we're really trying to avoid. And so this morning, full disclaimer, I do own a pickup truck, and I'll be glad to help you anytime. Yes, it has a hitch as well. It can tow things, but I do not own a trailer.